My name's Rick Frame. I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you very much to Selma and Rose and the organizing committee for allowing me to speak this morning. There are so many things that we can talk about. I've been asked to talk about the drug shortage issue that is kind of caught all of us by surprise. I too am a practicing medical oncologist. I work in Salt Lake City, Utah with a group called Utah Cancer Specialists. We're very similar to Dr. Lynch's practice, and I just empathize with Joe. I mean, everything that he is talking about and the challenges and the problems with the technology and trying to care for our patients, I just want to emphasize that as well, and I think you did a great job. So, and it's always nice to be on the same stage with Dr. Eagle. So these are the doctors who are trying to make the changes, who are trying to bring this information to our leaders like yourselves and to our patients and to our politicians, trying to get the word out. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today about the drug shortages. I should let you know that I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. I mention that for two reasons. One is the Detroit Tigers are in the World Series, and so I want you all to root for them. Thank you. And the other, and I need to be very politically correct about this. I'm going to be very politically neutral, but I grew up 1 mile from Mitt Romney, who also was in Detroit. So I just mentioned that. Don't hold that against me or for me, but I just wanted to mention that. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the drug shortage issue. And this is a topic that, as I say, kind of caught us all by surprise. And while I'm talking, I'd like you to think of questions. You've already asked quite a few good ones, so please think about questions to ask at the end of the program. I'll be disappointed if you don't have some good ones. There are many things, many challenges that we have in medical oncology. They include the number of clinics that are closing. You saw a map of the United States and the significant challenges we have there. The cuts that are coming in the future as far as the sustainable growth rate, the SGR, is a major cut that is coming in January. Sequestration is also an effort to rein in the budget, and that's going to hit everyone, medical oncology as well. So these tremendous challenges that we have are looming in front of us, and while we're talking about this, then this drug shortage issue comes up. And so I'd like to, has anyone here seen CSI? Crime scene investigation. So if there are any fans out here, then what I want to do is try and approach this topic in the same way that you would approach a crime scene. And so I don't want to imply that any crime has been committed. I don't think anyone is going to jail because of the drug shortage issue. But what I want to do is really give you the what, when, why, what, when, where, why, and who. I'm going to save the who for last because I think that is the real message about our patients, that we're all here fighting for our patients, and the passion that Dr. Lynch has and that Dr. Eagle has, I hope to also have for trying to recognize that it's all about the patients. And the reason that we're here is trying to protect our patients and give them the best care. So when I am through with this talk, I will expect you to answer these questions. So there'll be a test at the end, and I'll coach you along with the answers. But what I want to do is talk a little bit about the what. And the what is the drug shortages that are looming ever greater in front of us. This issue has come about in recent years, but as of last week, the FDA listed 122 drugs that were felt to be in short supply. And that short supply can range in a variety of different ways, from manufacturing delays to regulatory problems. Finances play a big part in it, as we will come to recognize. In this list of 122 drugs, 26 of them are felt to be in the field of cancer, in cancer treatment. How do we know that? Because I looked at them, and I looked at the list, and I picked out 26 drugs that we use in oncology practices. And some of them are supportive care, some of them are the very important backbone drugs that we've been using for decades. They include names like vincristine, methotrexate, leucovorin, daunorubicin, bleomycin, adriamycin, Taxol. These are the backbone, these are the erythromycins of chemotherapy. These are the medicines that we use on a regular basis to manage, help, control, treat cancer patients. And so when you look at the 26 drugs that we use in cancer care, this is a significant amount. This is something that impacts patients and impacts all of us in trying to find out ways to try and help prevent this problem from getting worse. All of these drugs are generic. These 122 drugs that are in short supply, and that means that they've come off their patent, they're not branded, that these are supposed to be the low-cost, easy drugs to make, you know, that they have been made for decades. And now there is a problem in getting them. And what we're going to do is look a little bit into the reasons for that and to try and understand how we came to get here and what, what solutions, if there are any out there, that are being discussed and that we can try and improve. When you go to the FDA webpage, you get a listing of these drugs. There's so many of them that they gotta break them up into different letters. I mean, you get for drug shortages, A to D, click here, E to K, click here. I mean, there's this gives you an example of the volume and the type of way that it is reported. And what I'd like to do is, kind of use my mouse and click on one of these, and we're going to click on the A's. So these are the lists of the medicines that begin with the letter A that are felt to be in short supply that are listed by the FDA. And what I'm going to focus on, I don't really need a pointer, but this last drug here that we have is called Atropine. Atropine. Atropine was a drug that I remember when I was growing up and had in medical school. I mean, this was the backbone of a lot of our treatments for a variety of different diseases. And I'll take just a moment here and talk a little bit in more depth about atropine, because it's really very interesting. It's a drug whose genesis goes back before biblical times. It is something that you have to look into Bullfinch's mythology text to really appreciate how far back this drug goes. The name of this drug, atropine, is taken from one of the three fates. You might recall in mythology that there were three fates, individuals who had different powers. And the name Atropos was the name of one of the fates where atropine gets its name. Atropos was the fate who decided who lived and who died and how you died. So it is such a critical drug, such an important drug, that even in, millennium ago, that they knew that this drug was going to be important. When you're taking pharmacology classes, you get all geeked up about atropine because it has a unique mechanism of action. It's an anticholinergic medicine, and it has a broad variety of uses in human medicine. And they include ophthalmic uses to dilate the eyes. In codes, when codes are happening, code blues, that you have resuscitation. You say, I always remember saying, nobody wants to die in a code without trying atropine. That you've got to give them a dose of atropine. Give them 1 milligram of atropine. You sound very, authoritative and, informed. It's an important medicine in resuscitations. We use it in cancer treatments to help with some of the side effects from the chemotherapy treatments. And there are particular medicines, irinotecan is one of them, that produces hypersecretions in the intestinal tract and a lot of nausea, upset stomach, and pain in the abdomen that is relieved with atropine. So atropine is used in our oncology clinics to help prevent the side effects from some of the treatments. And I couldn't believe it when earlier this year, my nurse came up to me and said, well, I'm sorry, but we're having trouble getting atropine. That was the real, another recognition that this was going to be a challenge in all of our, if we can't get atropine, there's something very wrong with the system. Atropine has been made since, for thousands of years. It actually goes by another name called belladonna, and I don't know if anybody, that rings with maybe some of the older individuals, but belladonna means beautiful woman. We're in an Italian restaurant, and so it is an Italian phrase that means beautiful woman. And in fact, in Italy, at a period of time, women would take this plant, the mandrake, and actually dab it in their eyes to make their eyes larger and to make them more beautiful. So belladonna, atropine, atropos, this is a medicine that has been around a long time. We're going to look a little bit in more detail about why it is now becoming a medicine that we are having trouble getting. When you drill down to atropine on the website of the FDA, there are 4 manufacturers that are making atropine. And all of them have challenges with trying to continue to produce it. Doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, there's something wrong here, that this has been available for decades, millennium, I would say. It comes from a plant. You make it. It's, one of the processes that have been defined over a long period of time. Each one of these companies is putting up reasons why they can't make it available. Has been discontinued manufacturing the ampules. The product will be made as soon as it will be made available as soon as it is released. Increase in product demand. Increase in product demand caused by market supply issues. There's increased demand because there's decreased supply of it. Shortage per manufacturer. Manufacturing delays. These are words that are used to describe why these companies can no longer make atropine. And the manufacturing delays may have some reality to it, or there may be other factors that cause the manufacturing delays to happen. So what I'd like to do now is move on to the when. When did the generic drug supply shortage occur? 2003. So you know the answer to that. In 2003, the MMA, Medicare Modernization Act, happened. And I think that it's fair to say that few, if any, drug shortages were in existence before 2003. So this is kind of the jumping off point for when this problem started. Part of the MMA was fixing the price of reimbursement for drugs at an average wholesale price, AWP, or now we use the term ASP, average sales price, plus 6%. The reason for this is because before 2003, medical oncologists were forced to buy their drugs and then sell them back to insurance companies or sell them to the patient at a markup rate that was variable and high. And so this was an attempt to try and put some controls on the pricing of oncology drugs for oncology clinics. And one of the unintended consequences of this legislation appears to be contributing to this drug shortage issue. So please understand that before 2003, this problem didn't exist. Since 2003, there have been drug shortages that have gone up and down. There have been as high as 195 drugs a few years ago that were in short supply. Now there are 122. Please don't believe that the problem is, is gone. The problem is still here. It's a critical issue for us. So we are now trying to get on top of it. And some of the things that have been done are helping us with that, but there are still significant challenges for all of us. Push the right button. And you see me putting my bifocals on back and forth. I lost my bifocals the other day. It was terrible. I couldn't see anything. I was looking around the house trying to find I got a dozen bifocals. I can't find any of them. And I go, oh, they're probably in the basement. So I go down in the basement. I'm looking in the basement. I'm down there. I know I'm looking for something, and then I forget what I'm down there for. So now I'm not only blind, but I'm confused, wandering around my basement, trying to, where are those glasses? And then I turn over a magazine, and there's my glass. I go, now I remember why I was down here. So, those things can happen. But the where do drug shortages occur? The simple answer is everywhere. Okay, you're not protected, whether you're part of a community oncology clinic or whether you're part of a large academic organization. All of the clinics that treat cancer patients are subject to the problems with drug shortages. In community oncology clinics, where over 80% of the patients in the United States are treated, we have trouble getting this list of drugs. And if this drug is on this list, then it doesn't matter whether you're part of an academic environment or an institution or a major cancer center, that these drugs are going to be a problem for you. So, Rose, I just got a text that we have our meeting this morning. Okay, so we have can we just take it from here? So, thank you. So the where is everywhere. It's in community oncology clinics and in larger academic institutions. So now you know the answer to two questions. Okay, one is when did it happen? It started after 2003. Where did it happen? It happens everywhere. Okay, now we get to some of the meat of the problem, which is the why. And the simple answer is that the cause of the drug shortage problem is economic. Okay, that's simple. It's true. I believe that the evidence would suggest that the reasons why this has happened is tied to the 2003 MMA. I don't think that when they were creating the MMA that they had any idea that this was going to be a downstream side effect of this program. But like a lot of things that we do, you try to do one thing right and it ends up causing an unintended consequence somewhere down the road. The majority of drug shortages occur where the profitability is low. And in part, what has happened is that these drugs have become less and less expensive all the time. People are always trying to say, how can you make it cheaper? How can you make it less? And so these strategies for making these drugs have really become bare-boned, that they don't have a lot of wiggle room for any problems that happen in the manufacturing process. At times, the AWP or ASP plus 6 is not enough to cover all of the costs involved with administering the drug. You have the nurse's time, any chemotherapy pumps, the challenges of trying to get these things paid for. ASP plus 6 doesn't cut it when you come to a lot of these drugs. So there are many times in our clinic where these drugs are so-called underwater. And you can't really expect an oncology clinic or anyone to give treatments where you're losing money on it. That's just, you're not going to be in business very long if you have a business model where these drugs are causing you to pay more than what you're getting reimbursed for them. So in many ways, there are manufacturing pressures, quality controls, regulations, costs, but in a lot of ways, the term a race to the bottom, to see how low you can make it, and then the reimbursement becomes even lower, then this is a business decision on the part of pharmaceutical companies that they're not going to make products that are not going to be reimbursed. So now, the one thing I want to say is that I am not a spokesperson for the pharmaceutical companies, for pharma, okay? I'm medical oncologist practice. I use these products, and they're extremely important and valuable, but when looking at this problem, when you understand that it's an economic problem and understand that a company can't be expected to make a drug for free, then I think you understand some of the root problems of it. And as you can see, I mean, these are complicated processes. There are a lot of steps involved with it. These are injections that are going into human beings. You've got a lot of regulations and control. But as more and more companies get out of the marketplace for making these drugs, and when there are only several companies left, 1, 2, 3 companies that are making a certain drug, when a problem comes to that line, a problem with supply of their products to make the drug, a problem with the regulations from government agencies, when there's any reason that can shut down the production of a medication in one plant, there are not a lot of other options for production of this drug. And so squeezing the marketplace has been a part of the issue and part of the problem to get these drugs covered. I want to show you an example from the New England Journal of Medicine, and I think that this is a really telling issue. I'm going to concentrate on leucovorin here, which is one of the medicines on this list, but there are Taxol, leucovorin, doxorubicin. You could go through a whole list of these. The AWP per dose price for leucovorin is $32. For its replacement drug, levoleucovorin, it's $1,284. So, you know, in some ways, the cost of the replacement drug is so tremendous that there's, you know, little reason to continue manufacturing a drug that has such, you know, potential loss. Now, let me say a few things about leucovorin. Leucovorin is a drug that we use for colon cancer patients. It probably it enhances and adds to the activity of 5-FU. Leucovorin came out in 1952. Okay, so it's been around a long time. And leucovorin, you know, was available. It's been being used, but a new medication that called levoleucovorin has a very specific activity, looks better pharmacologically. It's hard to show that levoleucovorin is a lot better than leucovorin at all. But in 2008, levoleucovorin, the new expensive drug, became available. 8 months later, there was a supply problem with leucovorin, with the old drug. So, you know, it's been being made since 1952, and all of a sudden, you know, in 2008, there's a supply problem with leucovorin, and oh, by the way, we happen to have a replacement drug for it that is 10, 20, 30 times the cost of leucovorin. So, you know, I'm not making accusations, but I am pointing out the facts that there are challenges in trying to help partner with manufacturing companies to continue making these low-cost generic drugs. So now you know the why. It's economic. I'm going to talk with you a little bit more about the who, because this is where I come in. This is the real, you know, meat of my topic, is where this drug shortage meets the patients. And it's not just the patients, but it's the physician staff, the pharmaceutical industry, politicians. There are a lot of people who are involved with this drug shortage issue, none more important than my patient Brenda. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about Brenda, because she's quite an interesting person. I've known her for several years. She's a fighter. She's a very dynamic individual. She is shy in large groups. I invited her to come and speak today. Unfortunately, she declined, but she's still alive, you know, and she's able to decline it because she's here. Now, Brenda was diagnosed in 1996 with breast cancer, and she was treated with a lumpectomy and radiation treatment. It so happens that her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she turned out to have the breast cancer 1 gene. She was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer in May of 2006. And just like all good ovarian cancer patients, they march through their treatments. And ovarian cancer is a disease where many different drugs are effective. You use a certain medication until the patient relapses, and then you move on to another medicine. And my goodness, they respond to that extremely well as well, just as Brenda did. And it so happens that, I'm sorry, she was started on Doxil chemotherapy in January of 2011, and she had good control. This is a really nice medicine. It's a drug that's given once a month. Okay, so oftentimes our drugs are given more frequently than that. It's well tolerated. It does have some peculiar side effects called a hand-foot syndrome, where patients get thickening of their skin in their palms and the soles of their feet. It's painful, and they have a slight neuropathy with it. But in general, those symptoms are manageable and controllable. And she responded extremely well to the Doxil. And we were very pleased. Life was good. And I'm sorry, this was I was looking at this as January of 2011, not November. Then my clinic became unable to get Doxil in August of 2011. And I couldn't believe it. This is the United States, that this is a drug shortage problem that has come home and directly looked me and Brenda in the face. And this is when I had to tell her, you know, Brenda, your treatments are going well. I'm pleased with your response, but we don't have any more Doxil. And she looked at me, you know, just in the most incredible way, saying, "Are you really? Are you telling me that you can't get me drug? This is a medicine that is saving her life and protecting her," and it was a horrible experience. I don't want to go through that ever again, and I want to do it as little as possible. That's why I'm here speaking with you today about trying to find ways to prevent that from happening. She had progressive disease. We needed to treat her with medicines that she had already received. It was an exercise in futility, trying to just maintain her condition rather than improve it. Well, then, through one of the solutions that have come about, the FDA has allowed doxorubicin to be delivered from India, where it is manufactured and produced. And so there are certain circumstances where the FDA allows medicines to be brought in, and this was one that was brought in from India as a solution. We were grateful to get it. If the FDA, you know, has done the homework and done their research to try and make sure that it is as good as the Doxil manufactured in the United States, then we'll go ahead and use it. And so she got back on Doxil, and we're very grateful for it. This is information about the Doxil shortage, and as you can see, shortage per manufacturer, manufacturing delays, for whatever reason that this medicine can no longer be manufactured well, but it can be manufactured just fine in India. So, you know, the same medicine can now be delivered here for us to use. I will give you an update on Brenda. She's still alive. She's still doing well. She required several hospitalizations for bowel obstruction. I saw her last week. She developed a new lymph node in her groin, and we are continuing her Doxil. She's been off because of some bowel obstruction issues, but we anticipate a good response for her, and this is her lifeline. And while there are other medicines that could be used, they're certainly not expected to be as effective as they are with the one that she's receiving. What happened next here is the information in January of 2012. At this time, FDA's regulatory discretion for the importation and distribution of Sun Pharma's Lipidox is limited to Sun Pharma Global FCE and its authorized distributor. This is telling us that it is now okay for the FDA to receive this medicine from another country for them to use for our patients, for us to use for our patients. This leads to the medical roller coaster ride, and you can imagine the emotions that have gone on with both Brenda and myself, the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows. So it is a real ride that we've been on with her, and so now I'm going to give you a test to see how well you were listening. And the test is the what? Well, there are 122 drugs, 26 of them are cancer drugs. When it happened in 2003, where it happens everywhere, why the causes are economic, who it affects everyone who's going to receive those medicines that are in short supply. It happens in particular to Brenda. I don't have a lot of solution slides, but I've got a few. So I'd like to move on and just share with you that this is an election year, and we do have two candidates, one Barack Obama. Now, I need to make a disclaimer. I've not talked with their campaigns. I don't know what their stance is on the drug shortage issue. It's probably not going to be a deal breaker or why people vote for one person or another. But as one moving forward, if one would anticipate President Obama to be in office for another 4 years, I think that the message that we would get from this administration is that there is a role for government assistance and there's a role for government regulation, and that some of the things that have been done already have been put in place because of Mr. Obama's attention to this. And so there are things that are being done to try and help address this problem. But I think with the election so close, I couldn't help but at least mention that this is a potential, outcome for this problem. If Mr. Romney were to become president, then one might expect more role for free enterprise and for market forces, and so perhaps less government regulation. So as I say, I think that these are general statements that are true, but in looking forward to how the election could impact what happens to drug shortages, I think that these are reasonable things to say. I've been asked to talk with you about the prognosis of the drug shortage, and here's what I say. This condition is very serious, and it's caused by multiple factors, the greatest of which is economic. The low profitability on generic manufactured drugs will continue to discourage production, and pressure or enticement to ensure adequate drug supply is necessary. And I don't know the details of how you do that with a carrot or a stick or both or some combination of each. Solutions, or why isn't this as bad as it seems? That we've been able to struggle through this, and while there have been many people that have been affected, there are things that are being done about it. Some of the things that are being done are importing drugs from other companies. And while we don't like this to happen very often in a circumstance, if it'll get Brenda Doxil, then we'll take it. So we'll accept these temporary solutions from the FDA. I'll share with you that in October of 2011, legislation was passed. It was signed by President Obama and went into effect as the FDA Safety and Innovation Act. And I'll speak more about that in just a few moments. But I will say that one of the reasons why this problem has been covered over, has been protected, ameliorated in some ways, is that there are a lot of robust treatment options. So, we have a broad variety of different medications. We've got several different chemotherapy medicines that can take the place of medicines, and while they might not be our best choice, they are satisfactory or effective to some extent. So we do have a very broad pipeline of drugs to choose from when managing cancer patients. We are also indebted to our pharmacists who help us identify where there are excesses of drugs and where there are fewer drugs. And so healthcare professionals have been sharing resources and supplies of various drugs, including those used in chemotherapy treatments, you know, say, oh, I think there's some in Ohio, or, you know, there's some in Florida, or, you know, they have ways of staying on top of the supply and when to expect the next shipment out. And so that attempt has been coming. I do need to mention that this gray market problem, or stockpiling medications and fraud control, that when people found that there were going to be shortages in drugs, there was the suggestion that people were stockpiling them to sell them at even higher rates at some point in the future. And while that may be happening, you know, it's not in my world. I don't see a lot of that personally happening, but other people are concerned about it. And so be aware of the gray market for these low-cost generic drugs. And I put this last comment in there for my wife. When I was talking to her about this talk, she said, you know, well, shouldn't pharma be responsible to help insure and provide the drugs, even if there is, you know, not as much profit to be made on these drugs as there are in times past. So this is not an indictment of the industry, but it's an effort to start the dialogue, at least of a conversation about some of the things that can be done. And in fact, in Europe, I think that it's fair to say that there are probably higher costs for the generics and lower costs for the brand names. So, you know, if we were to take a European model, then that would be a problem. Then that would be an option. This is the FDA Safety and Innovation Act. On July 9th, July 9th, 2012, President Obama signed into law this legislation. Some of the important features of this legislation are notification requirements. If you are producing a product and you know that it's going to go offline, then you are obligated to report that. There are expedited inspections and reviews, repackaging guidance to share medicines within any one health system. Reports, strategic plan, and study are also an important part of this bill. There's not a lot of teeth in this bill. There's not a lot of punishment for failure to report. And so while this legislation is important, it's kind of the first of its kind, it doesn't go far enough at protecting the supply of the generic drugs. Other people are working on this as well. Senator Hatch from Utah is floating around a bill, but it is tied to the reimbursement. And so the problem is economic, and the solution is probably economic as well. And so if you will join us in our effort to try and get this information out. I'm medical chairperson for the COA Patient Advocacy Network. Rose is our co-chair. We've worked on this issue and several others. Please help us find patients. I think Dr. Eagle said it best, when the patients are our best voice. And I can get up here and talk all day long, but if I have Brenda standing right next to me, she's a powerful motivator. So this is where we are going. We are trying to get the patients more engaged and more involved in our conversation, and so help us identify those patients. We're looking for motivated, intelligent, articulate patients who can understand these complex issues. So it is truly only through getting the patients involved that we're going to get this message. And sometimes, if you're lucky, and if you've been a cancer doctor for 25 years, you get to go on a fishing trip with 2 of your patients. I'd like to introduce you to Mario. He is the uncle of my chemotherapy nurse. So she has a very vested interest in helping him. He has advanced colon cancer and is receiving chemotherapy treatments and doing extremely well. He has a terminal condition. No one knows when he's going to die. He's responding to treatments. He's the type of patient who's going to be around for a long time for us to help. In the middle is my patient, my friend Rufus, elderly gentleman, bone marrow problem. He's got, needs treatment to try and increase his blood count and prevent transfusions. He outfished us all day long. He was the first one on the river, last one to go home. He was a star, a superstar. So please remember that it's all about the patient. So thank you very much for your time. And